You wake up without an alarm. The sun hasn't fully risen yet. The air is cool, and somewhere nearby you can hear birds beginning to call. You don't have anywhere to be. You don't have a meeting. You don't have a deadline. You just wake up, and the day opens in front of you like a field with no fences. For roughly 300,000 years, this was the default human morning. Not a luxury, not a weekend. Every single day. So what did they actually do with it? That question sounds simple. It isn't. For most of history, we assumed our ancestors spent their days in a relentless, exhausting fight for survival, hunting from sunrise to sunset, foraging every waking hour, living, as the philosopher Thomas Hobbes famously put it, a life that was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That image has been repeated so many times that most people accept it without question. But the archaeological and anthropological record tells a completely different story. In 1966, a landmark gathering of researchers known as the Man the Hunter Conference brought together anthropologists from around the world to compare notes on modern hunter-gatherer populations that still lived in ways similar to our prehistoric ancestors. The findings were startling. Richard Lee, a Canadian anthropologist who had spent years living with the Kung San people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, presented data showing that the Kung adults spent an average of only 15 to 20 hours per week on subsistence activities. That's getting food, water, and basic materials. The rest of the time? They rested, they talked, they played, they slept. 15 to 20 hours per week. The average modern worker puts in 40 hours a week at a desk job alone, not counting commuting, cooking, shopping, or any of the 1,000 other tasks that pile up around a modern life. Your ancestors, by comparison, were working what amounts to a 2.5-day week. But let's be precise about what that actually looked like, because the word free time in 300,000 BCE didn't mean scrolling through a phone. Imagine a morning roughly 50,000 years ago, somewhere in what is now East Africa. The sun is cresting the savanna. Your group, maybe 15 to 30 people, has slept together in a loose cluster near a sheltered rocky outcrop. A few people are already awake. A child is nursing. 2 older women are talking in low voices. Someone pokes at the remains of last night's fire. The day is not scheduled. It emerges. A small group of men and older boys might decide to go out and track, not because they have to, necessarily, but because the signs were good yesterday and everyone is in the mood. Tracking in this era wasn't a desperate scramble. James Sussman, an anthropologist who spent decades studying the Bushmen of the Kalahari and wrote about it in his book Work, A History of How We Spend Our Time, describes hunting as something closer to a skilled, almost meditative activity. You read the land like a language. Broken stems, dried dung, the shape of a hoofprint in dry earth. You move slowly. You wait. You think. Meanwhile, back at the camp, the others are doing something that might surprise you. They're mostly not working. Some are sleeping in, their bodies recovering from the physical demands of the previous day. A few women might decide this is a good morning to go foraging, moving through a stretch of woodland to gather berries, roots, or tubers they know from seasons of experience are ripe right now. This knowledge, accumulated and passed down over generations, is the real secret to how ancient humans fed themselves. They weren't guessing. They knew exactly where to look and exactly when. Polly Wiessner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, found in her long-term studies of the Kung San that women's foraging provided the majority of the group's calories, and they did it in a few focused hours, not all day. The rest of the camp's time was not empty, it was full. Children played, not organized play, not scheduled play, just the endless, absorbing, sometimes brutal physical play that children have always done when no one interrupts them. Climbing, chasing, wrestling, building small models of the adult world out of sticks and mud. This play was education. A child who had spent 10,000 hours chasing lizards and climbing trees was building spatial awareness, physical coordination, risk assessment, and social skills in a way that no classroom can replicate. Adults talked. A lot. Robin Dunbar, a British evolutionary psychologist at Oxford, has proposed that language itself evolved primarily as a form of social grooming. Before we had words, primates spent enormous amounts of time physically grooming each other, picking through each other's hair, a practice that releases endorphins and builds social bonds. Humans developed a more efficient version. Gossip. Stories. Who did what? Who is reliable? Who is generous? Who cannot be trusted? Dunbar's research suggests that roughly 2/3 of human conversation, even today, is social information of this kind. Around those prehistoric fires, the same thing was happening, and it wasn't idle. It was the infrastructure of survival. Knowing who you could count on in a crisis was quite literally life or death. In the afternoon, if the foragers returned with food, there was processing to do. Cracking shells, scraping hides, sharpening tools by striking flint against stone in a careful, practiced rhythm that required real skill to do well. Archaeological sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa, which was occupied by early Homo sapiens roughly 75,000 to 100,000 years ago, contain extraordinary evidence of this daily activity. Researchers found engraved ochre blocks, shell beads with deliberate holes bored through them, and carefully shaped tools that went beyond mere survival utility. These weren't just practical objects, they were beautiful. Your ancestors were making art between the hunting trips. And then there was fire. Every group in human prehistory, everywhere in the world where it's been studied, gathered around fire in the evening. This is not incidental. Wiessner's research, published in 2014 in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, analyzed the content of conversations recorded around daytime and nighttime fires among the Juhansi people of southern Africa. Daytime talk was dominated by practical matters, economics, complaints, work. Nighttime talk around the fire shifted almost entirely into stories of distant places, accounts of unusual animals, tales of people long dead, speculation about the nature of things. Wiessner called this the original expansion of the social mind. Fire extended the active day by hours and turned those hours into a kind of collective dreaming. The things discussed around ancient fires, the maps of other territories, the remembered behaviors of prey animals, the social rules about sharing and fairness, were the first libraries, the first schools, the first internet. So let's be precise about the actual rhythm of a day. Wake gently, morning talk and nursing and fire tending, a few hours of focused, skilled work, hunting, foraging, tool making, a substantial midday rest, especially in hot climates, napping or simply lying in the shade, more social time, processing food in the late afternoon, an evening around fire, sleep. It sounds, honestly, like a good life. And here's the thing that turns this whole picture sideways. Agriculture, which humans developed independently in multiple places around the world starting roughly 12,000 years ago, did not make life easier. It made it harder, much harder. The skeletal evidence is unambiguous. Researchers examining the bones of populations before and after the adoption of farming consistently find the same pattern. Pre-agricultural skeletons show taller stature, stronger bones, fewer signs of dental decay, and little evidence of the joint degradation that comes from repetitive, grinding physical labor. Post-agricultural skeletons are shorter, weaker, riddled with cavities from a starch-heavy diet, and show the marks of bodies pushed into repetitive toil. Farmers worked longer hours, ate a less varied diet, and were more vulnerable to famine when crops failed. Jared Diamond, the evolutionary biologist and author of Guns, Germs, and Steel, called the adoption of agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. He wasn't being casual. He meant it, literally. What hunter-gatherers had, and what farmers gave up, was something economists now call slack, unscheduled time, buffer, the space in a day where nothing had to happen and therefore everything could. You can feel this absence today. When someone asks you what you did over the weekend and the honest answer is nothing, you feel a small irrational twitch of shame. You feel as though you wasted time. That feeling is not ancient. It is very, very new. For 300,000 years, doing nothing productive on a given afternoon was not a failure. It was the system working correctly. It meant the food situation was fine. It meant you had room to think, to play, to connect, to imagine. The alarm that pulls you out of bed every morning is around 12,000 years old. The guilt that follows a slow afternoon is younger than wheat. Your body still knows the old rhythm. It's why the first morning of a real vacation, when you finally wake without the alarm and lie in the growing light with nowhere to go, feels less like leisure and more like relief, like something slipping back into place. That feeling is 300,000 years old, and it belongs to you.